Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Union or Bust. What do we got going on today, Chris?
How's everyone doing? I'm Chris Lopez, your union brother on TikTok, Instagram, all the platforms. Obviously, we got Organizing Monster, Juan Perez, and a special guest today, Dr. Jill Stein. Anyway, on the Union or Bust podcast, we like to talk about kitchen table economics, but there's three things that we like to do on the Union or Bust podcast, and we like to have fun, we like to have party, and we're trying to get everyone healthcare at the same time. I think that's what people need. They need a positive vibe, a positive discussion. So, Dr. Jill Stein, thank you for coming on the Union or Bust pod. Tell us a little about yourself.
Great. Well, I definitely believe in fun, partying, and healthcare. And yeah, I mean, that's really why I'm running for office. So by training and by profession, I'm a medical doctor. I also describe myself as a mother on fire because things aren't working out so well for our kids here in our homes, our communities, and around the world. And I moved from clinical medicine to political medicine after a couple decades in the clinic, seeing not only that we have a sick care system, not a healthcare system, and we have a overall economy and food system and education system, you name it. We have sort of society-wide sickness factors. Things are making us sick on all levels, from poverty to pollution to community violence. And I felt as a doctor like, hey, I'm here trying to pull people out of the water. We need to stop them from throwing us into the morass to start with. And I discovered when I started working as an advocate for progressive reform, from healthcare to getting money out of politics to a healthy food system and schools and getting students out of debt and that kind of thing. I discovered that actually our government is not working for us. Most of the time they're working against us with the perpetrators to start with. So I got tricked into running for office way back in 2002. And I discovered, oh my God, if you don't do this according to the book, if you kind of have an out of the box, like human conversation, there's a lot of room to move here. And there's also a lot of unhappy campers. And we can kind of harness that to, for a political revolution, which is begging to happen. And I think right now we're in a perfect storm for that because people have really had it with being thrown under the bus by our bought politicians and the oligarchy that sponsors them. So, working people are the name of the game. They are the driver of change, and they are also kind of on the front lines of abusive politics. And I'm very excited about this perfect storm right now for political change. So it's really great to be on this program and talking about, what working people are doing really to lead the charge for the democracy that we deserve and a world that works for all of us.
That's awesome. We had big shout out to the California Nurses Union, Hollywood for CalCare. And we actually had Max Cotterill, shout out Max, on our podcast, and he talked about CalCare. We actually have something going on in California, single payer, and Sharon O'Riordan from Hollywood for CalCare. People, I like your cat. That's cool.
You
I
want
used to
to
have
join the party? What can I say?
yeah, so I had a cat the same
Everybody can
color.
party.
And however, I lost my train of thought. Your cat
Calcare.
was just so beautiful. I lost my attention.
Yeah. No,
Cats do that, They change our world every time they show up. It's huge.
yeah. Chris was talking about cow care. So
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom ran on single payer. And since he got into office, he stopped talking about single payer. Right now, there's a bill, it's AB 2200, which is cow care, single payer. in California. It's never, obviously, we haven't passed it yet. So those are the people that we've had on, somebody from CNA and somebody from Hollywood for CalCare, on the podcast to talk about CalCare, the facts, why we should pass it, why it's taking so long. And it was an eye opener for us because we were Bernie supporters. So obviously we're for Medicare for all, but they talked about how like these or not pharmaceutical, but healthcare companies have AI now to where it's robots or AI like denying healthcare to patients. And
Mhm.
that's how they make their profits, by denying healthcare to patients. How during the pandemic, more people or less people seeked care.
Hmm.
So that's when they made the most profits of the healthcare companies. So there's obviously like a positive correlation or a negative correlation. I don't know what the right term is, but basically, the less care people get, the more profits they make by denying healthcare. So I understand you're a doctor, you're a big advocate, but you're for Medicare for all, I would imagine, right? Is that something that you're going to push going in?
By the way, I was going to say that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is like such a no-brainer. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous that we are denied the right to healthcare as a human right for everyone from the get-go. And the wonderful thing about single payer or Medicare for all is that it's like motherhood and apple pie because it removes the waste, the bureaucracy, the paper pushing that gets spent by the health insurance industry and big pharma. Tracking, that's what they love to do. They love just a mountain of minutia and this kind of fake work to track who owes who for how much money and what did the plan cover. And then you have a gazillion plans. So there's all kinds of complexity that eats up 1 out of every 3 healthcare dollars. This is outrageous. We are spending like $4.5 trillion a year on healthcare, and over $1 trillion is going into basically just administrative bloat. That's the wonderful thing about Medicare for all. It just cuts through that with a single payer, so you don't have to do all this tracking of who got aspirin and how much, and did you have a Band-Aid applied while you were in your hospital room, and just all this minutia that we spend so much time and money tracking. And Medicare for all, single payer, cuts through that by just having one payer, so you don't have to figure out what's the paper trail for who owes who. There's one insurer, which then covers everyone, and you save so much money by getting rid of that bureaucratic waste. You can expand healthcare to cover everybody and cover us comprehensively. Mental health, chronic care, your parents get sick, they've got to be at home. How are you going to take care of them? They have to spend themselves down into poverty in order to get Medicaid coverage. Well, no, with single payer, you have chronic care and you can get whatever you need to keep people at home or to care for them in a facility if they need a facility. But you have chronic care, acute care, mental health care, covered from the moment of conception to the grave, your eyeglasses, your hearing aid, your teeth, dental care, and it saves money. It saves so much money that we can cover everyone. And it's paid for through a tax base, which is progressive. So taxes will go up on that for very few. It's a very small minority. It might be 10 or 15% where the taxes will go up. So the wealthy are paying their fair share, but the costs are basically going to go down for everybody else. So this is like a no-brainer. Why don't we have it? We don't have it because the foxes are running the chicken coop, because the insurance companies and the health insurance companies are running the show. So this is like the first thing that we would do in a Stein administration. We would declare a healthcare emergency, and we would begin to move on day one on Medicare for all, because we do have a health emergency in America.
I think a lot of people, Dr. Stein, are feeling it. People are having difficulty paying their rent. I think it's in the 70 percentile. People can't pay their rent. Electric bills. We're talking about all these things that are exacerbating what's going on. People can't afford to pay for health care. I think we're at that point where people are like, it's my understanding 1 out of 4 people live with medical debt? I believe
Uh,
it's very high.
it is very high. I know it's 100 million people, and there are about 350 million in the US.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, it is. In fact, it's even more than 1 in 4 who are living with medical debt. Yeah, it's outrageous. And, as you know, the biggest cause of bankruptcy is medical debt in people who actually have health insurance. So that's like how insane the system is. And what you described happening with your beloved Governor Newsom,
Shout
this
out
is
Gavin Newsom.
happened.
Shout out Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
Shout out, join the party. Come on down. We'd love to talk. But this is what we see all the time is that Democrats will give lip service to this, but then when they're in a position of power, suddenly they won't do it. I know in California, everybody supported it until the Democrats then had control of the legislature. And then suddenly the speaker refused to allow it to pass when, they love to blame it on Republicans until they're in power and then they won't do it.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was another case. In my home state, we passed a referendum, or we almost passed a referendum that would have brought single payer to our home state, to Massachusetts. This was like in the late 1990s, and it was running way ahead in the polls until the last minute when the insurance companies and big pharma threw a lot of money, outspent us by about 50 to 1 with all their like wall-to-wall deceptive advertising, warning that, oh my God, you're going to wait in line, or oh my God, you're going to get rationed out of care, all the things that are actually happening. They just put out big scare tactics and said that what's happening under private care would happen under Medicare for all. And they beat it back 50 to 1 outspent. They beat us back by about 2 percentage points in the referendum. So
Wow.
that was just, such a lesson that people want this, and it's just the fear campaigning by, the politics as usual that allows this to be really ripped out of our hands. And it's intolerable. It should happen. And I think there is enormous public support, but we need leadership that's not going to back down. And that's been the problem.
And you were
Right.
just talking about that. People are rationing their insulin right now.
Yeah.
It's
Like
disgusting.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
incredible.
when we're in unions, right, we're constantly organizing workers and negotiating contracts. A lot of the negotiation time and energy is spent in negotiating for healthcare. I understand that some unions have come out to support single payer here in California for sure with CalCare. There's already some unions that are signing on to this, but not all unions.
Mm,
Um, well, that's
mm.
why I said we're like the little radical ones in labor here in San Diego because we're super loud about Medicare for all and CalCare because we understand it's a worker issue.
Totally.
Unions like to say like, well, the thing is, some unions, I've heard it personally, would they use healthcare as a carrot, something that they dangle when organizing workers, like, oh, you don't have healthcare, why don't you join the union and then you have healthcare? To me and Chris, it shouldn't be that way because not everybody's in the union to begin with. Only
Right.
10% of workers are in the union. What about the 90% that aren't? What about people
Yeah.
that are not
Yeah.
workers? So that's how we view
Exactly.
things is like
Yeah.
everybody deserves to have healthcare. And then if something like this passes, it only helps unions with organizing because now workers are more likely to go on strike, take a
Yeah.
risk because
Exactly.
their healthcare won't be tied in to their employer. So now they're like, yeah, screw it, man. I'm getting taken advantage of. I hate what's going on. Why don't you do something about it? You know what? Now I will do something about it because I don't run the risk of losing my health care. So that's why we try to make the argument within labor, within unions, that it actually help us with organizing. And we like to brag
Mhm.
about things like,
Right. Good point.
and we like to brag about talking points for you with unions. And we like to brag
Right.
about
Yeah.
and we like to brag about like, oh, the labor movement brought you the 8-hour workday, overtime
Yeah.
pay, child
Yeah.
labor laws, weekends. Why don't we just have another notch under our belt, which is healthcare for everybody in the US?
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer, but I think it's the same thing that's going on maybe with the Democratic Party. They claim to be for healthcare, and then when they get in a position of power, they build relationships, there's money going around. So I like to say that me and Chris are the little troublemakers out here, and eventually we're gonna get fired because we keep pushing the envelope. But that's okay because we're pushing the envelope to give everybody health care, not to sell cell phones or whatever. You know what I mean? So, full disclosure, I did vote for you in 2016. I was a I was a big old Bernie bro. I went to Philadelphia for the
Oh,
convention,
oh,
and
wow.
I saw it all firsthand how it went down. That was my first time I got politically involved. Was that the 2016 campaign, and then a lot of us were Bernie or bust. That was like the little campaign that was created within the Bernie supporters. Hence, Union or Bust, the podcast. I took it from
Oh,
that.
cool.
Uh,
Oh,
so,
cool.
but then I was like, screw it, and then I voted for you because I was like, I'm not gonna vote for Hillary. I'm not gonna vote for Trump either. So full disclosure for our viewers, they're gonna be like, and we're in labor too, so I'm gonna get shit for this kind of stuff. But we don't care. We're the little troublemakers, like I said. Um, but
And can
speaking,
I just add to that, what Frederick Douglass said was that power concedes nothing without a demand. And, that demand has to be political as well as, social and on the issues. If there's not a political threat, it's not going to happen. And I mean, I think that kind of courage to stand up for what working people deserve is essential, because if we don't make that demand, who's going to make it? We have to be willing to stand up and fight for what we want. And this this blame game, this shame game is false. It's absolutely false. And we know that people who vote for Greens otherwise won't vote. And we know that from polls, we know that from talking to people. So it's an effort to say that, to like to extort you and to intimidate you into voting for an abusive system. And it's like breaking up with an abusive relationship, with an abusive partner who's been throwing you under the bus, and they keep making promises and they never deliver. And it's a very unhealthy and abusive relationship, and it really holds you down. The idea that people who vote for third parties are driving us to the right, and are helping Trump, it's really false, because we are largely bringing out people who otherwise aren't going to vote. And that is usually the largest block of voters. In 2016, that was 100 million people who didn't vote. And they were basically voting with their feet to say, we don't like either of these guys. And we know we have a system in which people are mostly voting against the person they hate the most instead
Mhm.
of voting for what we want. And if we never put out what we want, it's like we don't have a democracy. A democracy is not just like random votes against whoever the worst guy happens to be. Democracy really needs a vision of what it is that we want and what it is that we deserve. And then we organize to build power to create that vision. If we're silent about that vision, if we just kind of muzzle ourselves and go along to get along and vote for the lesser evil, we've never put out what our vision is, what our demands are. And we have to do that. I think it's completely anti-democratic to suggest that somebody owns your vote and you have to give your vote to someone who owns it. No, politicians have to earn our votes. They are not entitled to our votes. And anyone who suggests that they are entitled to your vote should be removed from contention. They shouldn't even be considered, in my view. It's really fundamental to democracy and to representation is to say what it is that we want and to stand up and to fight for it. And the idea that you're helping Trump by standing up for Medicare for all is just false. It's not supported by the actual numbers. Who was it? Famous author said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And that's one of those damn lies when they say, oh, you know, the Green candidate got the margin of difference between Trump and Hillary, like in Wisconsin. But actually, those votes are not movable. You can't just say, oh, let's just put the Green votes into Hillary's category. It doesn't work that way. Green voters were voting against Trump and against Clinton. And, we're in this magical moment right now where people don't like either of these zombie candidates that are being rammed down our throats. So it's really a golden opportunity. In fact, there are twice as many people now who identify as independent as who classify
Oh, wow.
themselves
Wow.
Democrat or Republican. So like for us to be silencing ourselves, for us to allow ourselves to be intimidated by, by basically the DNC and their effort to silence their competition, that's what this is about. And I'll just say one more thing about this, which is that if you look at the most spoiled election ever from the point of view of Democrats, it was 2010. It was the midterms of 2010 when the Democrats lost 1,000 state rep seats. They lost 64 congressional seats, 12 Senate seats, and 13 governorships, all in one election. It was the worst, shellacking, as Obama called it. Why were the Democrats being shellacked? There was no third party to blame it on. They were being punished by working people for having been thrown under the bus after the Democratic trifecta, the Democratic White House, the Democratic Senate, and the Democratic Congress. They all colluded basically to bail out Wall Street to the tune of trillions of dollars, while millions of homeowners lost their homes. And, that was on top of NAFTA and shipping our jobs overseas. So people have had enough. They're done being thrown under the bus. So the Democrats created this whole spoiler thing, which is not really new. It's been used forever, going back all the way to the Civil War. The abolition parties were also called spoilers. If you're challenging oligarchy, you are called a spoiler, and they will do their best to try to smear you, fear campaign and smear campaign, to maintain power. That's what they're doing, is keeping their stranglehold on power. And I think it's really important to have the courage of our convictions, because we are the ones we've been waiting for. Nobody is going to make these critical reforms if we're not standing up and demanding them. And that means politically too.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely. That's really interesting, because the narrative you're talking about, narratives, MSNBC or Fox News or whatever. One of the reasons Juan and I started this podcast was because we wanted to talk about the main thing, kitchen table economics. And now you brought up third party. It's really interesting right now, because with social media, all these platforms, I think it's opened up whole new opportunities for you, for Marianne Williamson, for whoever's running, Dr. Cornel West. So what I'm thinking is, there are so many candidates and there's so many possibilities. So before I started the podcast, I went back to 1824. Yeah, so it was Andrew Jackson who got the popular vote, 41%. And then John Quincy Adams had I think 30%. And then you had Henry Clay, and then you had Crawford. I think, and what happened was it went to the House of Representatives, and John Quincy Adams won. I think what's going on right now is we have a perfect storm right now with social media. People are getting the word out. They can't suffocate us any longer with MSNBC, with Fox News, or whatever mainstream media they have. And another thing, I think they've kind of realized, hey, wait, we don't have control. Let's ban TikTok. And we're getting the word out. Do you think we would have all the calls for a ceasefire if we did not have the social media platform? I was talking to Juan before. I was like, we could have lost all this momentum. I think social media is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what the First Amendment is about. It's about freedom of the press and freedom of speech. And, we don't have a nowadays where we all gather to hear, announcements. We rely on news and on journalism to be the watchdog, and to be watchdogging power, to be watchdogging foreign policy, to be watchdogging things that we can't see and hear with our own eyes and ears. That's why this was written into the First Amendment, that we have a right to a free press that is helping to educate us as voters, as members of society, so we know what's going on and we can have an informed opinion. And that's exactly why they are shutting it down. Why is Julian Assange rotting in a prison right now, being about to be extradited to this country and locked up for life, unless they can work out a deal? And I hear there's some, stuff going on behind the scenes, and it's to the credit of dissidents like us that is happening, that he has even a fighting chance. But this is why they shut him down. This is why they shut down Edward Snowden. This is why they shut down whistleblowers and the rest, because they don't want us to know. And this is what abusive power does. This is what, the US had a revolution against way back in the in the late 1700s, where press freedom was really under attack as well. And the founders, they did some things right. They did a lot wrong too, but they did some things right. And one of those right things was putting the First Amendment first, for the very reasons that you're saying. And RFK, who I think is kind of a manipulator, and people are only beginning to find out what he's really about. We could have more discussion about that if you want, but still, he has relied on social media entirely, because mainstream media hasn't covered him except to smear him. So he has certainly proven the power of social media to really change the dynamics of the election. And it's a tribute to independent journalists like yourselves that we are being educated. And I think, exactly as you say, that the fight to stop genocide in Gaza is happening really because of dissident print media and social media and independent media in general. It's a huge power, which is why they are trying to tear down TikTok, or at least put it under US control. It's been shown that that US government really colludes with big tech to censor social media as well as legacy media and all that. So absolutely, keep doing what you're doing. We really need it, and our democracy and our future depends on it.
Yeah. So speaking of all of that, Julian Assange, Snowden, whistleblowers, and then us going outside of the mainstream media, and you running in the Green Party, um, have you heard of allegory of the cave from Plato?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead and say more
So,
about that.
so I don't know too much. I just watch YouTube videos all day, but all this it always pops up on my feed. But basically, it's these people are slaves. They're chained up to a wall in a cave, and they're watching projections on this other wall that are being projected from behind them. So there's people behind them projecting with torches, and this is what a sun is, this is what a wolf is, this is what whatever is, showing them images and showing them what the world is outside. But they're in the cave, they're chained up. And they're happy that way. Then one slave breaks out, and then he sees what the world is really like. He sees what it's like to be in the sun, what butterflies are like, what the grass is. Then he comes back to the rest of them in the cave, and that tells everybody, guys, like, this is not what life is. Life is actually outside. These are fake projections from these people trying to control us, telling us what the world is, but it's not really like that. And then they shun him. They ostracize him. What do you know, you fucking idiot, you this and that. You're just so they shun the messenger, basically. And then like, in YouTube, when you're watching these type of things, they link it to what's going on here in life. So they linked it to, like, that's what the Matrix is. Morpheus comes out, he red pills people and wakes everybody up, because that's not what the world is. Oh, there's a cat, he wants to party.
Yeah.
That's not, yeah, so like that's what I think we are in when we're doing this podcast. Because I'm telling Chris, like, check it out, dude. What's going on in Gaza is not what the mainstream media is saying. What's going on with Julian Assange is not what the media is saying. And what the Democrats are saying here in California, it's not what really is going on. And then I get shunned all the time. They're like, oh, you fucking, and then that's why they came up with the term conspiracy theorist, to shut us out, because they can't have a legit argument. So I just wanted to bring that up, because you were talking about Snowden and whistleblowers. I think that's what's going on, is that we're trying to red pill everybody, but their response is you're going to get ostracized. You're not part of the status quo. You're trying to break the status quo. But I want to give you another talking point for labor.
Okay.
Um, third partied. So, you know, we use the term third party. Like, oh, you're just a third party, spoiler candidate, third party. In labor, when we're organizing workers, an anti-union messaging that the corporation uses to stop the organizing or to get a no vote, they third party us. They're third party the union. Oh, the union just wants to come here. They're just a third party. They're not really you guys. But in reality, the union is them because they're organizing themselves and the
Cool.
contract's going to represent
Yeah.
them. So just an FYI, I see some similarities here with what's going on
Yeah.
with third
Very
party
cool.
candidacy to what organizing is. But that's what always establishment uses is they always try to third party people or they always try to other people because they don't have an immediate response or something substantive to argue with. So just wanted to throw it out there that third
Nice.
party happens everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe that's another basis for solidarity among us, third parties to fight back. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so speaking of that, so just recently of the ceasefire, we organized behind the scenes. So we're part of a labor council. The labor council has delegates. Every big city has a labor council, and
Yes.
that's the glue for all the unions to come under. And
Yeah.
it's a whole thing, right? We're delegates to our labor council, and we have an
Great.
e-board. We pushed our e-board to sign on to the ceasefire, to
Awesome.
ceasefire
Yeah.
resolution.
Yeah.
Not everybody has signed on yet. Um, Big unions have not signed on yet. A lot of labor councils haven't signed on yet. So what we wanted to do is like snowball effect across the labor movement to call for a ceasefire, to push Biden to call for a ceasefire. So that's what we're doing behind the scenes here within labor for the ceasefire. And that's what we're doing here in California to push CalCare to give everybody health care. So our platforms are pretty in line, Dr. Jill Stein. So that's why I'm really grateful that you jump on. But here in California, I want to talk about policy real quick. Here in California, we try to push or we try to pass UI benefits for striking workers, unemployment benefits for striking
Uh,
workers.
mhm.
Gavin Newsom just vetoed this last year. Again, shout out Gavin Newsom, he's our
Shout out
boy.
Gavin Newsom.
Shout out Gavin Newsom.
So, like, would you think that's something that you can, is that something that you can push federally or nationally, or is that has to be something on a state by state level?
Uh, I think it can be both, and it is part of our labor platform, actually.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Mm.
yeah. We will be posting this like within the next week or two, and I could just run through it,
Let's
if you're
do it.
interested. But it
Absolutely.
definitely includes, benefits for striking workers. So in no particular order here, we're calling for a $25 minimum wage, which is indexed to inflation and actually tied to the cost of living in specific geographies. We call for a guaranteed livable income above poverty. So, it's like the minimum basic income, but we believe it should be more than minimum basic. We
Right.
think, uh, everyone deserves to live above poverty in the wealthiest society, in the history of the planet. We believe in universal rent control, guaranteed housing, affordable housing is a human right. We think there should be federal support for worker-owned cooperatives to just like diversify our economy, expanding and defending the right of workers to unionize, including domestic and agricultural and so-called gig workers. They need to be entitled to the benefits of unionization. Union representation on corporate boards, which ought to be at 50%, giving voting rights to pension funds for workers, repealing Taft-Hartley, ending the so-called right to work for less laws, that really tie the hands of unions, because unions are negotiating for all workers, whether they are members or not. So it's rightful that everyone should pay into that and make that possible. We think workers' comp should be federalized and ensure full funding for workers' comp. Closing the pay gap and wage discrimination based on race and gender and other factors. A domestic workers' bill of rights, a law to prevent wage theft and to ensure the right to recover stolen wages. Let's see. Oh, ending the sub-minimum wage loophole that allows, some workers to have, what is it, like a $2.50 minimum wage, which is really outrageous. We call for a national solidarity fund funded by a 1 cent per worker hour pay-in that would ensure that workers who are on strike or locked out have funds to draw on, basically to fund the right to strike, which is so, such an impediment to and a deterrent from striking. Let's see. To federally mandate and fund 3 weeks of paid sick leave, 8 weeks of paid vacation per year, and 1 year of parental leave for all new parents. And also guaranteed free childcare. To mandate unionization of all federal employees, to ban at-will employment, and to require just cause for termination. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of the highlights of the plan.
What about captive audience meetings?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
So
that also should be
all
needs to, yeah,
union busting uses
yes,
captive audience meetings. When I organized
absolutely.
this company 3 years ago now, 4 years ago, Encore, they did a lot of captive audience meetings. Like that was their bread and butter, is to bring them in because they pay them, so they're captive. And then they bring in the lawyers, and then they have talking points, they have PowerPoint
Yeah,
presentations,
yeah.
and I know some states have already banned it. We haven't. We're trying to ban it here in California,
Mhm.
but I think that's the bread and butter for corporations when they're union busting, is
Absolutely.
captive audience meetings. So no, it sounds like you have a really good worker oriented policy platform. That's great. I think your ordinances are pretty good. We're trying to pass an ordinance here in California. I can't really talk about it yet, but it's something similar to what you're talking about, to raise the wage. Because, yeah,
Mhm.
sure, like if you're in a union, you tend to make more money. That's the argument that we always make. But what about the non-unionized workers? So we're targeting everybody with this ordinance. I don't, like I
Right.
said, I'll talk about it later this week, maybe.
Well, you have to care about people you don't know.
Yeah.
And Juan and I, on our way to the podcast, we stopped by this Mexican place. Shout out Super Sergio's.
Damn.
And well, anyway, we pulled up and, full disclosure, I ordered a breakfast bowl with extra sausage.
Double everything.
Yeah. We didn't get any drinks. You got a breakfast burrito, but it
Yeah.
was $31.29. And we
Uh,
didn't get drinks or anything. And
wow. Yeah.
it's just
Uh-huh.
interesting. Um, it wasn't always like that.
That's Bidenomics, by the way.
Bidenomics?
That's
Shout
Bidenomics.
out Biden.
Yeah. So that's what we're trying to say. Like, and we have decent jobs with decent salaries. We're
Yeah.
staff on unions. Imagine everybody else making the minimum wage. Minimum wage here in San Diego is 16.10 or something like that.
1685.
Sixteen eighty
Yeah.
five an hour.
In San
Yeah.
And
Diego County.
San Diego
San
County.
Diego County, yeah.
Yeah. So, I stepped out real quick to check my camera when you were mentioning your policy.
Hmm.
You say your minimum wage, you're shooting for 25
Hmm.
uh, dollars an hour minimum wage.
Yeah. And then indexed to inflation or to productivity, whichever is higher. But, the idea that we have minimum wage that then stays there for 10 years or 15 or 20 or 30 years, it needs to be it needs to be a living wage, and then it needs to be indexed because we have an inflation problem,
Right.
and yeah, for exactly the reasons you're talking about, the cost of food has absolutely skyrocketed, and people just don't have discretionary income, between the outrageous rent prices that just keep skyrocketing, and then healthcare costs are skyrocketing. These are all going up way faster than the inflation rate. And what they said was just like supply chain problem. Well, it turned out there's no longer a supply chain problem, but inflation continues and it doesn't come back down. So it's really a horrible hardship. And so, yeah, we need to ensure that as the cost of living goes up, that wages are going to be tied to that.
Yeah, they just did a study here, and I read an article that to comfortably live in San Diego, you have to make
Mm.
over 100 grand, 120 grand.
Unbelievable.
Nobody makes $120,000.
Right. Yeah.
Last study that I saw back in 2018 said that 50% of workers make $32,000.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
This is an emergency. This is a state of emergency. People are losing their homes. We have the highest rate of homelessness on record. Evictions are off the chart. Millions of people are getting evicted. We know that once you get into an eviction cycle, it's deadly, and like the mortality rates go way up when people are struggling with eviction rather, likewise for addiction too. The two kind of go hand in hand. And the world is just not working, and like it's not like we like to complain, but on the other hand, this is not okay. And our lives are really endangered. This isn't about just, you know, well, it's not only like wanting a share of the pie here, where it's worker productivity, which has really been driving the success of our economy. It's all about this massively expanding worker productivity, but working people can no longer survive in this economy where you have 3 billionaires that have the wealth and the resources of 50% of the population. 3 billionaires have, and those billionaires can then control policy. It's like there's this famous quote from a former Supreme Court Justice, Louis Brandeis. It's kind of like there's a university named after him that's near me. So his quote was, "We have a choice between a democracy or vast concentrations of wealth," and we have vast concentrations of wealth greater than any moment in history and greater than any other area of the world. So we have this very corrupt system, which is why, in my view, you can't solve this around the margins. We can do a lot with specific policies, but we also need a big challenge here. We need a big reboot to the system. We need, we need to eliminate poverty. We need jobs and a guarantee of jobs, as well as a guarantee of living wages. We need healthcare. We need an economic Bill of Rights, which is part of our Green New Deal. Our Green New Deal will meet the emergency of the climate and the emergency of our environment, where we are losing, our water supply, our ability to grow food. The Colorado River is within a year or two of shutting down, and that's like what irrigates the whole California agriculture system, which supplies fruits and vegetables for the whole nation. We have a whole series of converging emergencies right now, and we deserve to stand up and really demand fundamental, far-reaching change. We really need that political revolution that Bernie Sanders promised us before the election got rigged, to lock him out basically twice. And he did everything right. What did the Sanders campaign not do right? They did everything right. It was really an exemplary campaign, which is one of the things that affirms my, belief that you can't have a revolution inside of a counter-revolutionary party. And that's why, myself and a whole lot of other people now are really dedicated to fundamental political change, that we really have to challenge the system of rule by political parties who are funded by bankers and billionaires and the fossil fuel barons and big corrupt business in general that abuses labor, abuses the planet, and is destroying our future. I think, as a medical doctor, I have great, faith in the agency of everyday people to be masters of our health and our future and our society. And it's really important to tell it like it is. We are up against the wall here in just about every dimension of our lives. We're kind of at the end of the road. Empire and oligarchy are falling apart before our very eyes here day by day. We're squandering half of our congressional budget on the endless war machine, which is not making us more secure. We've had one major war after another, which is absolutely catastrophic, makes us less secure, not more secure, and which is impoverishing us here at home. How is it that we are about to spend $17 billion? I think this just passed last night, I think.
Yes.
$17 billion bill. Well, it's a much bigger bill, but built into that bill is $17 billion to fund the ongoing genocide and to fund the expansion of this war into a Middle East war. The U.S., in its stupidity, is now bombing 4 other countries and Iranian targets outside of Iran at a time that Iran is now networked with Russia in a military defense pact. So you've got nuclear weapons that could be brought into this. This could blow up on all of us. In this day and age of nuclear weapons, which are proliferating madly right now, because we particularly have led the destruction of our treaties. But, not to mention that the UN actually has a law now that makes it illegal to have nuclear weapons. We should be signing on to that treaty and getting rid of the nuclear weapons. Nonetheless, we are in the age of, incredibly destructive firepower. And when you have even a little nuclear war, you basically create this thing called nuclear winter. Big explosions, nuclear explosions send lots of dust and debris into the upper atmosphere. So it doesn't come down for years, like decades even. And that permanently dims the sunlight and it wipes out food production. So, we're all in the crosshairs of this conflict that could really blow up on us. And this is where we are spending our dollars instead of ensuring that we all have adequate housing and, basic income to keep people out of poverty and put an end to student debt and ensure that every student has a right to post-high school education, whether it's technical school, community college, or college. It should be a birthright that you get trained up to have a fighting chance in the economy. There's so much that we could be doing, but because of the power of the weapons industry and APAC, our political system empowers the predators. And we have a political system that gets jerked around by those who give big campaign contributions and spend a lot of money on lobbying. And by definition, that's the oligarchs, so the oligarchs are running the show. The rest of us are being thrown under the bus and over the cliff, and we can't beat around the bush anymore. We can't keep doing what is massively failing. There are real solutions on the table right now that could start to fix this on day one. Go ahead.
Wow. We have a mental health crisis in our country. And I'm I'm a union representative, and I'm always very honest with my members. Sometimes they come to me with problems, and I've battled depression, I battled anxiety, I battled alcoholism. I gave my life to the Lord. I haven't had a drink in, Juan and I were talking about 15 years. So
wow.
It's been
He's proven his point now. I tell him, like, all right, you made your point.
Yeah. I made my point.
Yeah, it's on the party. Come on.
But anyway, that's where we are. It's like people can't afford their rent. People can't afford to pay their bills. Where is our money going? It's just, you're going, what about you, Juan, you were talking earlier about, we have to start working on our house. We have to start, otherwise it falls down.
Yeah, I was telling Chris, like the more that we overextend ourselves militarily across the world and bombing everybody and spending all our money and resources elsewhere instead of fixing our infrastructure here at home, then of course we're going to deteriorate from the inside. Here in San Diego, at the end of January, we had a big old thunderstorm. I don't know if you saw the news. Big old thunderstorm. Like we hadn't seen that kind of rain in a long time. It flooded in a bunch of different places in San Diego.
Mhm.
People lost their homes. People are got evicted because there were houses with 3 feet of water across San Diego County, and and then people are suing the city now because they weren't cleaning out the sewage and the river pipelines and all that stuff. So they're
Yeah.
blaming that on different things now, pointing the fingers everywhere. That finally the government declared it as an emergency and is sending
Mhm.
funds.
Mhm.
People are gonna get $4,000 to $5,000 checks, and that's it. I mean, like these people that are losing everything, right? When you lose your home, you lose everything. All the furniture is gone, your electronics are gone when water that's 3 feet high. What are they gonna do with $4,000?
Yeah.
They're not gonna
Yeah.
repair their lives. And
Oh,
then they
yeah.
see on the news that we're sending billions across the world for more bombing and more bombing. So now how do we convince these people to come and vote for these Democrats?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, this really is the perfect storm. We've kind of hit rock bottom, or we keep thinking we've hit rock bottom, and then it gets even worse. And people's lives they're in crisis, mental health crisis, substance use disorder crisis, killing 100,000 people every year. Why did that happen? That happened because the Sackler family was allowed to write their own drug permission for opioids because of influence peddling in our regulatory agencies. People no longer have confidence in our government institutions because they've been hijacked. They've been sold to the highest bidder. So, it's part of the Declaration of Independence, that all just power derives from consent of the governed. Well, we, the governed, no longer consent to this monstrosity, this very abusive system, which is serving the wealthy few. And they get wealthier by the day. And when Biden talks about Bidenomics, he's talking about people who are invested in the stock market. And yeah, they're doing great if you're in the upper 10 or maybe 15%. But everyday working people are struggling, just to keep a roof over their heads, let alone put food on the table. And our food system is getting sicker by the day. It's about to go down in a big way when the Colorado River goes down. And the outrageous thing is that all of this is fixable. This is eminently fixable, but we need to have people who are serving the public interest and not serving their own, a bottom line. Why is it that Congress is still allowed to play the stock market? This is absolutely outrageous that Nancy Pelosi is swimming in, millions and millions of dollars in successful trades because they can use their special knowledge. This, as far as I'm concerned, the whole lot, they need to be thrown out. They need to be removed from power, not only because of their corruption. We have legalized corruption in this country, and anyone who's not fighting that legalized corruption, anyone who's not fighting to get money out of politics and to close the revolving door, those who are accepting huge campaign contributions, who give the thumbs up to super PACs, which allow billionaires basically to throw unlimited amounts of money into their campaigns. They should be removed from office, if not prosecuted for criminal, human rights abuse. As far as I'm concerned, the leadership of Congress, along with Biden and Blinken, they are war criminals. They're absolutely war criminals, and Congress keeps putting their stamp of approval on this, while 30,000, more than 30,000 people are being tortured and murdered on a mass scale. This is being normalized by what is being allowed to take place in Gaza right now. So it's not just Gaza. It's really the tip of the iceberg, and it's really the destruction of a system of human rights and international law, which is being just torn apart right now. The US is used to being top dog. We are not going to be top dog. In fact, we're not top dog any longer. Economically, you probably know that the BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia,
I was just
India,
talking about
We
that
were
this
just talking
morning
about
to
that on the
Chris.
way to Super Sergio's.
Yeah.
yeah, they're already ahead of us. And we start initiating a trade war, for example, by shutting down TikTok. Well, there are lots of U.S. Derivatives that are functioning out of China. And so China can start shutting those down and insisting that they not have parent companies here in the US. This is absolutely nuts. We need to be a team player here, and we need to be run in the public interest. Right now, we have a government which is of, by, and for big corporations and oligarchs. And oligarchy and empire go hand in hand. Their day is over, and the American people are sick of it. And we're not only sick of it, but we know that we can't survive. We'll be lucky if we make it through the next decade, let alone the next year, considering what's on our plate. So we really need a system change, in my view. We've got too many emergencies crashing down on our heads right now, crushing inequality for workers, for communities of color, for youth who've really been locked out of the future economy. So crushing inequality, climate collapse, and the collapse of our water systems and our food systems and the oceans, and as well as the climate. And then the endless war machine, which is verging on nuclear. And the Democrats have all their spin, and we could talk about some of that spin, their claims to being, servants of the climate or working for working people, which is a joke. When you shut down the right of the railroad workers to strike, when you force the railroad workers to basically adopt a contract that they have already rejected, a contract for the railroad workers that basically laid the groundwork for the catastrophe at East Palestine, by ensuring, that people are so overworked, they don't have predictable days off, they don't have predictable schedules, and there are 2 or 3 of them on trains that may be 2 or 3 miles long. So how in the world are you ever going to maintain safety standards on these trains? And that really laid the groundwork for the catastrophe in East Palestine. And that was the president, together with the support even of the squad and the Democrats across the board. It was Democrats and Republicans. What these parties agree on is just devastation of working people and our climate and foreign policy, and a pox on both of their houses. We should not think that we have to accept one or the other when they are both deadly. They're both deadly to working people and the planet, and we have to stand up. We have nothing to lose here. What could be a greater sign of fascism than genocide? So as far as I'm concerned, Joe Biden is just as much a threat to our democracy as Donald Trump is, and we should not be intimidated into thinking we have to accept one or the other. We have to stand up for what it is that we deserve, and to understand that however far we get, it is the springboard for an ongoing movement. This is about building our movement for working people, for the planet, for a healthcare system as a human right. It's all of that rolled into one. And the further we get, the better position we're in. And let me put out one other thing, which is that there are going to be 4 candidates here, which are anti-worker, pro-war, and anti-climate. And that is Biden, Trump, RFK, and no labels. So you may have 4 major campaigns that are all splitting the pro-war, anti-worker vote. And there will be one campaign, which is ours, which is on track to be on the ballot across the country to truly be contesting for power, to truly be challenging empire and oligarchy. We will be the only such campaign on the ballot. There's several other, wonderful candidates out there, but they do not have the means. They have never done it before, and they are proving not able. You don't learn this in one race. It takes a while to learn how to fight to get on the ballot, because the playing field is so steeply tipped against, non-corporate grassroots political parties. So we will be on the ballot. The others won't. We're exploring ways that we might be able to collaborate in this race, and my fingers are crossed that we can make this a unified and team effort. But there's basically going to be one campaign that is on the ballot across the country, which is pro-worker, anti-war, anti-genocide, and anti-climate change. So it could be a unifying moment. And when you have 4, well, it would be then 5 campaigns that are splitting the vote. Most states assign all of their electoral college votes
Yes.
to whoever wins. And you can win with a plurality. That is, you don't have to have a majority win. So you could win this with as little as 25% of the vote without sending it to the House of Representatives. That's not to say that's what necessarily going to happen, but it's important not to have our aspirations and our goals drummed out of us, which is what they want to do. They want to make us hopeless, because if we're hopeless, then we're powerless. And to my mind, it's really not about hope, it's about power. And I want to quote Alice Walker, who said, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We, the people, have the power. There's a huge majority that wants Medicare for all now. Huge super majority. Same is true for getting money out of politics. Same is true for, a job as a human right and a living wage. There are so many things on which there is agreement where we have large numbers. You can look at 100 million people in student debt. If they knew that they could vote to end their student debt, you're going to bring a lot of people out to vote. I'm sorry, to end their medical debt as well as their student debt. You could bring a whole lot of people out to vote. So it's not hard to imagine how we could get to a winning coalition if we have the courage of our convictions.
I was just thinking of everything you were saying, and Americans are more productive now. Technology is advancing on itself, and it's very interesting that we're still working long hours. It's like we don't share in the prosperity of the companies. It's like, why don't we have more time off, more time with our families, more time to remember who we are? When you were talking about, you don't know the power you have. And it's funny, I tell this story, and I guess I'm going to have to tell it again. When I talk to new union members, I tell them there's an old story. When I was a young dad, I was like 28 years old. I took my daughters to the zoo, and we went to go see the cheetah cage. And it was a big cage, they got trees in there and everything. But I'll never forget, Dr. Stein, there was a golden retriever, a dog, inside that cage with the cheetah. And it was barking at that cheetah, going, "Rah!" really loud. And the cheetah was all scared. And I was thinking to myself, holy cow, that cheetah could rip that dog's face off. So I talked to the zoo guy. I go, hey, what's going on over there? He's all, oh, the cheetah thinks the dog is dominant because the cheetah was born in captivity. So I always tell my new members, remember who you are. You're part of the union. You're part of the labor movement. We don't cut side deals. We work together to get the best contracts possible. And I think that's a very, very interesting point. People need to remember who they are. So just
Exactly. And what our power is when we do act with solidarity. We are really unstoppable when that happens, which is why they want to silence people like you and people like me who know what our power is. And I think this is a magical moment right now where the stars are really lined up, in a cosmic way, because people are hurting so bad. All ears are open right now and eyes are open, and people don't need to be convinced that the system has thrown us all under the bus. So it's a very powerful moment, I think, for us to be standing up for a world and an America that works for all of us, and not to take no for an answer. We have the power here.
Right.
Amen.
And you mentioned like Congress and the president, they have the lowest approval ratings, period. All these institutions, um, the judicial system, all of them. Labor
Yes.
has the highest approval rating amongst every institution, every organization. So labor
Right.
is where it's at. Labor has an 81% approval rating, highest it's ever been since I
Wow.
believe the 40s or 50s. Amongst Gen Z, it's 88%.
Wow.
So that's where we're at. That's why you see Amazon organizing, Starbucks organizing across the country. That's why you see UAW, Sean Fain. He said he's going to spend $40 million in the next 2 years in organizing. That's crazy. That's like what I don't even know what this is, honestly. Like this is a whole new phase of labor. I like to call it, and it's the
Mhm.
new age of organizing. But we use social media, we use TikTok to organize because we have to meet people where they're at. That's organizing. So I think that's what you all are doing. That's what the Jill Stein campaign is doing. And I like it. I like everything that everybody's doing. We can't endorse on this podcast because we're turning into a C3, sorry. But yeah, we're part of the system. But we do what we can. We're here to uplift voices. That's all we're here to do. Have
Exactly. And
conversation.
you educate your listeners, which is the name of the game here.
That's the name of
And
the
they
game.
can only get away with this murder because they shut us out. So yeah, it's really all about, this uprising in social media and independent media, as well as everything else. Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And there's this huge uprising in labor, and it keeps bumping into you know, these regulations and rules that hold it back. Why aren't we seeing more contracts get negotiated? So like there's a whole lot of Starbucks unions right now, but Starbucks is not making contracts, so it's very hard to get from A to Z, but things have begun. Things have begun in an absolutely unstoppable way. The amount of public support that labor has generated is just mind-boggling. And then the proliferation of unions across so many sectors now is just really exciting. And if we could get some more elected officials into office so that we can pass some more bills that raise the standards and that stop the efforts to, the sit downs, the mandatory so-called education sessions, that really push back against unionization. If we could begin to tweak some of the rules here, this could really roll forward in a huge way. And if you look at countries like Iceland, where there's a very high rate of unionization, and where this is just like a way of life. This is how you just improve life for everyone, for the whole community, working people, retired people, kids, just the quality of life is improved when labor is recognized as the foundation that it is of civil society.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the
Sure.
head. In countries where union density is the highest, voter turnout in elections is a lot higher than here in the US. And these European countries have voter turnouts in the 70s and the 80s percentile. Here in the US, we have 50% voter turnout. In the primaries, we had 10% voter turnout, 15% voter turnout in different counties. It's like, what? Nobody cares. Nobody, because I think what we see on TV for these primaries with Biden, and we don't care. People just don't care. Even people that are involved don't care. But I believe going into the general election, we better care. We better care with what's going on. We have options on the table, but getting the word out is half the battle, though. Getting the word out on union organizing is half the battle too. So, any last words, Dr. Jostan? Thank you very much for joining us. I know you're a very busy person. You're campaigning out there. I know we're a small podcast, but we're the little engine that could, because we're super involved here in San Diego. But any last words you have before we end this episode?
Yeah, so I want to pick up on something you just said about low turnout for primaries. And I happen to know the numbers in Michigan, and so there was this big uncommitted campaign, which was, like against Biden, basically, but it was uncommitted, which is just a first step. But uncommitted was getting like 14% in Michigan, like 20%, I think, in Minnesota, and so
Hawaii?
on. But if you look at the numbers of people who didn't come out to vote at all, that's like even bigger. It was like 100,000 people who voted uncommitted in Michigan, but it was about 500,000, if you do the numbers, who did not come out for the Democratic primary, who came out in 2020, that didn't come out this time. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there is this enormous bucket of voters who are saying they're not supporting business as usual. They are now entered the category of, I'm not going to vote unless you give me something to vote for. So this is not about taking votes away from Democrats. This is about giving people a reason to get out. And at the end of the day, the old school the predatory political system, they're going to try to shut down our communications in every way that they can. This is about us fighting back with the likes of this podcast, with us, just talking to our neighbors, our our unions, our labor councils, et cetera, to get the word out about why this is such a powerful moment for change and how we can really make this happen. And I encourage people to go to jillstein2024.com and you can just sign up for our newsletter. We're doing a lot of traveling. We've been out to California like about 2 weeks ago briefly, but we'll be back. And, we'd love to see you out there in the streets and online. And together we are an unstoppable force. And I really encourage people to check us out and consider actually standing up and fighting for the full measure of what we deserve and what our lives actually depend on. Everything from ending student debt and medical debt and demanding healthcare as a human right and affordable social housing, so-called. There are ways we can build a lot of housing without having predatory sprawl, basically. There are real solutions here. Cutting our military budget, which makes us less secure, not more secure. The funding is there. Taxing the rich, who've had an incredible giveaway over the last several decades, where the corporate contribution has dropped from 6% of GDP following the Second World War to 1% of GDP, So the contributions of those who are profiting most have been absolutely slashed. So this is a time to stand up and use the tools at our disposal to save our very own lives, our families, our community, our future, and the planet. It really is in our hands to demand a world that works for all of us, and that is within our reach. So thank you so very much for this wonderful conversation, letting me come on to rant with you. And I look forward to maybe seeing you on the street at some point, or maybe here again on this podcast.
Definitely. Real quick, can I ask you for a favor?
Sure.
So I'm currently going through a campaign right now with these workers. The company's called Encore. My
Okay.
union is IATSE Local 122.
Okay.
So we represent workers that are stagehands, AV
Mm.
technicians, set up the lights, the audio, the video for conventions, concerts, theater.
Okay.
Encore does all the
Yeah.
AV audio visual for hotels, most of the hotels across the country. It's the biggest AV
Mhm.
company. We were the second city in the US to have a contract. Now we're gonna go up for the second fight though, for the second contract fight, and we
Mm.
might go on strike.
Mhm.
We were not there yet, but
Mhm.
the contract expires next February. So I was just
Wow.
wondering if you can just give them a shout out. I stand in solidarity with the Encore
Sure.
employees, just something like that, just so I can show them, like, because these guys get motivated when they know that they're being supported
Oh, yeah.
outside of just me, outside of just Chris, or outside of just this union. They need to understand that everybody has their back in this fight. And this, by the way, full disclosure, this company is owned by Blackstone. So they did 4 months of union busting when we filed
Whoa.
for an election back in 2020, and we still won
Oh,
with a
yeah.
75%. So
Oh,
it
unbelievable.
didn't work on these workers. This company that they hired is known to charge $4,500 a day. So, and we still beat them. So, anyways,
Unbelievable.
yeah.
Yeah, so big shout out for Encore. Thank you for leading the charge. Thank you for standing up to union busting. Thank you for demanding your contract. And thank you for being willing to strike if you need to get that contract renewed, because you are the leading edge and you are serving us all by raising the bar for working people everywhere and for unions. And this is so much of what we need. So I want to just give you a big thank you and tell you that we will be waiting and watching and supporting you, and all the best. Really give them hell and demand that contract. We're behind you all the way.
Well, he's
Thank
grabbing
you.
all the shout outs. I want to do a shout out now.
This is America.
So while I have you, Dr. Stein, so
Sure.
we're going into negotiations right now with Food for Less, part of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union,
Oh,
Local
wow. Okay.
135, and they're owned by Kroger. They're
Yes.
the largest grocery chain in the country. It's
Wow.
not Walmart. It's not whatever.
Unbelievable.
It is actually Kroger.
Oh,
And
amazing.
and
Wow.
so like to say on the Union or Bust podcast, the main thing is to make the main thing the main thing. And we're not asking to give everybody, a car or iPhones or whatever. We're just asking for people to be able to pay their rent, the basic fundamentals of human existence: food,
About
drink, shelter, safety needs, healthcare. So if you give a shout out to all the grocery workers who work for Food for Less, fighting for their contract.
awesome. Great. So big shout out for Food for Less and for standing up to fight for your contract. And thank you for, being the force that gets our food on the shelves, that enables us to feed each other. And thank you for standing up for decent working conditions and strong wages, because food workers have to live like all workers have to live. And by fighting for respect and dignity and a good contract for the food workers, you are basically supporting those needs for all of us. You're raising the bar for us all. So for Food for Less, thank you so much, and keep up your good work. We're behind you all the way.
That's why we're the hottest labor podcast in California.
Yeah. That's what we just say. We say that. We say silly things all the time. But thank you, Dr. Jill Stein, again for having us, for jumping on the podcast. We'd love to see you out here in California. Maybe we can do an episode live in person.
Oh, that would be so fun. Yeah.
We just got this new
Great.
studio. You can't see it, but we just moved into our new studio in December. So we're trying to grow this podcast,
Very
make
cool.
it a real thing. And then good luck out there. Good luck out there, and I hope the best for you and your campaign. And keep the good fight. I don't know. What do you think,
Yeah.
Chris? Yeah.
I had a great time. It was a party.
It was
It
a party.
definitely
This
was.
was, yes, this was totally a party, a power party. So
Power party, yeah.
power party. Let's keep it up, and hope to see you on the campaign trail and in your studio. So
Awesome.
look forward to the next time.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Have a good day.
Solidarity.
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 Solidarity. Bye-bye now.
Bye.